Good morning and welcome to LGBTQ Northwest Indiana and PFLAG Crown Point TV. Your hosts for today are Amari Victoria and Elisabeth Menning. Welcome to the show. They've got a great deal of topics to talk to you today about, a lot of interest, and of course, timing-wise, we were talking before the show, we had to reschedule this, but I think the universe had that plan for us with the Supreme Court ruling, which we're all on the edges of our seat to hear what your opinion is, and we've all been celebrating since that decision took place. So good morning, and the show is yours.
Good morning, Bill. Once again, welcome to the LGBTQ Northwest Indiana and PFLAG Crown Point TV, episode number 4, produced by the Bill and Callie Show. My name is Amari Victoria, Executive Director of LGBTQ Northwest Indiana.
I'm Elisabeth Menning, President of PFLAG Crown Point, Northwest Indiana. We both go by the pronouns she, her, hers.
Happy Pride Month.
Happy Pride Month. I kind of blinged out for it. She's much more sedate.
We would like to thank the Bill and Callie Show and their sponsors for providing us the opportunity to come into your homes with a show dedicated to everything LGBTQ.
So our TV show will come to you twice per month, and we'll focus on topics and news important to the Northwest Indiana community. Whether you identify as LGBTQ yourself or consider yourself an ally, you know somebody who's LGBTQ, or you know somebody who wants to become an ally or learn how to be, this show is for you. So we have a special announcement, well, a couple of them actually. The first one is that our organizations are standing in solidarity with hashtag Black Lives Matter. We have both joined over 700 other LGBTQ organizations in signing a joint letter committing our support against racial violence. And I believe that was the one that was just published yesterday. So I have some excerpts from that letter. That the LGBTQ movement's work has earned significant victories in expanding the rights of LGBTQ people. But if we don't have the freedom to enjoy them, what good are the rights? So many of the LGBTQ organizations have made progress in adopting intersectionality as a core value and are committed to being more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. But we have to make a stronger commitment to embrace anti-racism and to end white supremacy, not just as necessary corollaries to our mission, but as integral to the objective of full equality for LGBTQ people. So a quote from the letter, we understand what it means to rise up and push back against a culture that tells us we are less than, that our lives don't matter. Today, we join together again to say Black Lives Matter and commit ourselves to the action those words require.
Our second special announcement for today is the historic decision recently made by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that LGBTQ workers cannot be fired or face job discrimination because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. In a landmark decision on Monday, the Supreme Court voted 6-3 in favor of giving LGBTQ federal protection against workplace discrimination. Last year, nearly 2,000 charges alleging LGBT discrimination were filed with the EEOC. The conservative-leaning Supreme Court voted to expand Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to protect LGBTQ people. The Civil Rights Act barred sex discrimination in the workplace, but since 1964, that portion of the law has been interpreted only to bar discrimination between men and women. That law will now be expanded to protect LGBTQ workers from workplace discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. These two characteristics are now protected.
So, yes, Bill, as you mentioned earlier, I mean, that was very exciting news, especially coming right on the heels of the negative news about the rollback of transgender healthcare protections. So we are thrilled that the Supreme Court ruled that way. Everybody is. There's a lot of celebration.
Yes, there's been a lot of joy in that announcement that comes on the heels of President Trump removing healthcare protections for the LGBTQ community. Obviously, we have much more work to do, and we will continue that fight.
It was very cool that the Supreme Court made their ruling during Pride Month, because, like I said, it really helped offset the other decisions. But so, anything more you want to say about that, Amari?
No.
Bill, do you have any questions or comments about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. The timing on this was just atrocious, and you've talked about the difficulty in obtaining health care already, and the bias which shocks me with the healthcare professionals, and then to have an executive order state that can be, there's no protection there, is just beyond comprehension to me. I think the closer we get to identifying that we are humans, and irrelevant what our orientation is, what our personal beliefs are, we should all be afforded the same protections for equal health care, equal rights in the workplace, all across the board. And I've said this repeatedly, the more we get closer to that understanding, the better I feel and the stronger our community will be.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So some segments of our show today will include a little bit about LGBTQ history.
So we're going to talk just briefly about what is Pride. We talked a little bit about that last show. Kind of give a reminder of some of the dates in the history of Pride, and talk about what the Pride flag represents, and introduce some of the others.
I have a couple of other LGBTQ news items from LGBTQ Nation, a couple of good stories this time.
And then our feature topic will be on identity. This discussion is continued from the last couple of shows. And in particular, we're going to talk about how we use labels to describe different parts of our identities.
And then we'll have some regional announcements for Pride and other events and activities, and the continuing virtual and Northwest Indiana support and community meetings.
Yep. And then just to point out, we got featured on the Woman to Woman NWI magazine. We're in the featured story there. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that as a great, this magazine is a great regional resource. Okay.
All right, let's dig in. What is Pride and why is it important? At its core, Pride is still a political, cultural, and social statement that LGBT people are equal in every way and expect to be treated that way. In this way, it is still a protest.
It is also a celebration of one's true, authentic self, of being able to be one's authentic self. For some people, that's just the day of. For other people, it's just a reinforcement that they're able to be who they are. And then later in the show, we'll talk a little bit more about what authentic self means. So again, happy Pride Month. We're going to start out with a short segment on LGBTQ and Pride history and give you a reminder of some of the key dates.
The first date is June 28th, 1969. Of course, the day of the Stonewall Uprising.
And as you may remember, the Stonewall Uprising brought the gay liberation movement in the United States to the forefront.
Another important date, June 28th, but this time in the year 1970, which saw the first Pride Parade.
In New York City, it was known then as the Christopher Street Liberation Day March, and it was named after the street on which Stonewall is located. Just had a couple hundred participants.
And on the same day, Chicago, Los Angeles, and San Francisco and others also hosted their first Pride marches.
All right. So we do have some leadership lessons that we can take from the aftermath of the Stonewall Uprising.
And the first one being that change is possible when people speak up.
So that speaking up doesn't have to be in the form of a riot, and it definitely should not result in violence. It could be a public manifesto, could be holding private meetings with other leaders who can help, or could be just simply advocating when you see misbehavior or something being done wrong.
The second lesson from the aftermath of the Stonewall Uprising is that sometimes movements take time to catch on, and that's okay.
When it comes to doing important work and creating positive change, we can't be afraid of small beginnings. It takes time for advocacy to build momentum and for us to inspire others to join on our quest.
And the third lesson is that there is power in organized groups.
So the Stonewall Uprising was the spark that helped the LGBT community see that they could fight back against the laws that were oppressing them, rather than just accepting them as the way it is. From that uprising came organized groups that rallied the community on specific issues that helped move the needle forward. And so as each of us works to create positive change in our area of focus, we're not fighting alone. Find allies who are willing to join together with us to make steady progress towards our goals. Groups are important.
So today, a symbol of the LGBTQ community and pride is, of course, the rainbow pride flag. It represents all aspects of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer communities. It was originally designed by Gilbert Baker in an 8-stripe version. Elisabeth will cover the meanings of those stripes as they were intended. That flag was commissioned in 1978 to produce the very first pride flag for about $1,000. Makeup of material, dyes, and arts and crafts supplies.
And important to remind people that he did not copyright it or trademark it.
That's right. He felt that because it stood as a symbol, that other folks in their fights could modify the flag to their desire to promote their cause.
Mm-hmm.
In 1979, there was a 7-stripe version of the flag, and the reason for that was that one of the fabric colors was not available. And again, the number of stripes was reduced to 6 for the flag that we know and love currently, and that was changed in 1979, and some of the colors were also changed. I should say the indigo color was changed to royal blue, and the turquoise stripe was removed. I believe that those were all in an effort to make it easy to manufacture, etc.
Yep, it's pretty interesting about the history of the pride flag. Wikipedia has some great information about that, so I encourage you to Google it yourself. But the colors. So the original 8 colors. Hot pink at the top stood for sexuality. Red stood for life. Orange, healing. Yellow, the sun. Green, nature. Turquoise, art and magic. Indigo, serenity and harmony. And violet, the spirit. So in Philadelphia, they added extra black and brown stripes at the top of the flag to highlight the fight against racism and honor the, quote, black and brown members of the gay community.
Although the pride flag is the most recognizable and most popular pride flag, there are actually many, many others. There is a flag specifically for the transgender community. It represents transgender pride, diversity, rights, and remembrance.
Show them your button.
There, see my button is in the transgender flag colors. They are baby blue, which is normally associated with baby boys, pink, which is normally associated with baby girls, and white, which represents transitioning genders, or intersex.
So there are,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah. Okay.
Missed my cue. Some other examples of pride flags are a flag that represents the bisexual folks community, pansexual community, and there is a specific flag for intersex people. They're used typically to increase the visibility and recognition for those specific communities and to distinguish it from the other segments of the community.
So we're not going to go into detail about all these different pride flags, and this is just a small subset. You can see the transgender flag at the bottom middle, and the rainbow flag that we talked about is now 6 stripes up in the upper corner here, and then the Philly flag with the extra brown and black stripes is down here. So this is just a subset of all the flags that exist, but of course I love the colors.
Yes, she does. I can vouch for that. Now, Elisabeth will cover some regional pride-related announcements.
Okay. Bill, did you have any comments or questions about the little tiny bit of history that we just did?
No, I'm finding this extremely interesting. I never knew there were that many flags associated with the community. So
It's really amazing.
Yeah, I'm going to sit back here and continue getting an education. This is
All right.
great. Thank you very much for providing all this.
You bet.
So I'm going to go back into my upper off screen. So
Okay.
I don't want to distract anyone. So yeah, it's like,
All
what is he
right.
doing here? So
Regional pride related announcements. Of course, this year with the coronavirus, there's been all kinds of changes, postponements, cancellations, turning virtual, etc. So we just wanted to give another current rundown of what's going on near us, or in our area, I guess. So Northwest Indiana Pride, that's the one that Amari and I helped produce. That has been rescheduled for September 12th. We're still obviously in the trying to figure it all out stage, determining whether people will be comfortable attending, whether sponsors will be comfortable committing, whether vendors, so it's still in the works.
The coronavirus has certainly impacted every large gathering.
Sports, concerts, pride, festivals. So South Bend is not having their large festival this year, but they are still having their week-long Pride celebration full of smaller events. I believe Goshen Pride is still pending a decision. Fort Wayne out east and Spencer down south, those have both been rescheduled to the fall. Michigan City canceled their Pride event. Chicago canceled their Pride event. Indianapolis is going virtual, and that is actually this Saturday.
Yes, it is.
So from 1 to 8 Central Time, you can go to, if you just Google Indy Pride 2020 virtual, you'll find how you can get information about that. But that should be a really good event. They always do a really nice job. They've been running for years. And then the most exciting thing to me is this global virtual Pride. So that's going to be on June 27th over the course of 24 hours. And if you remember, like how they do the New Year's Eve celebrations where they kind of go around the world and show you all the fireworks and that through the time zones, this is going to be much the same way. So queer communities from around the world are going to be gathering on this day to celebrate and highlight the international movement to address racism and police brutality following the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Their virtual event is going to feature numerous performances as well as messages, and this is pretty exciting, from world leaders, including former Vice President Joe Biden, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar, and some key celebrities like Laverne Cox, Adam Lambert, Keisha, and Todrick Hall. So I guess one upside of the coronavirus pandemic is that it's opened up this opportunity for a cross-cultural, transnational celebration. You want to talk about this one, Mike?
Sure. An event that's actually coming up here this coming Sunday is the Love is Love 5K, put together by Paul Stofko of Crazy Legs Race Series. And he's done this now twice to support Northwest Indiana Pride. We will be out at Bloom County Park.
Mm-hmm. We're all going to be socially distanced. Don't worry.
Just to watch the Love is Love 5K. I believe it's a walk and run.
It is a walk and run. There are over 40 people registered right now, so that's very exciting. They are going to be following the social distancing etiquette, and so we will not have an awards ceremony. We will have an information table, but it's going to be very minimal. We aren't going to sit there and that type of thing. So we are making the modifications, but we're real excited about it. Of course, Paul's clear it with the Bloom County Park, and it's going to be a really great event. It was a lot of fun last year. So that is Sunday, which, yes, it's Father's Day, but it's in the morning. Starts at 8. All right.
Okay. I have a couple of LGBTQ feel-good stories for today. The first one is about a mom who held a gender reveal party to celebrate her transgender 6-year-old's gender. Earlier this month, a woman named Zoe Lynn posted pictures on Facebook of her daughter jumping out of a box holding pink balloons. The box said, "It's reminiscent of a gender reveal party." Lynn wrote about her journey in accepting her daughter for who she is, and says that her daughter was assigned male at birth, and she thought that she was open-minded about gender. When her daughter wanted a princess dress at age 2, Lynn bought it for her. When she wanted to take musical theater lessons and wear a dress, she said she and her husband supported her. Quote, "I don't believe clothes or colors or toys have genders." She and her husband have always made clear that and kept all the choices open. By keeping those choices open when it comes to gender expression, she wrote, is different from accepting that your child is a different gender identity. Last year, Avery told her dad before school, "My life didn't turn out the way I planned. I think I should just stab myself in the throat." Obviously, that created some really bad feelings. And this is at 5 years old. She said, "I was supposed to be a girl, but I'm a boy." Lynn said she wasn't ready for that, but she drove to the Gap to buy girls' clothes for Avery, telling her about how she can be a girl, that people feel the way she does. But Lynn wasn't feeling comfortable herself and says that she cried over this. She had fallen in love with a baby boy for years and had to let that go. But then she says she stopped crying because she feels that as much as she struggled, it will be so much harder for her daughter. They do have a few unsupportive people in their family, but they do have an incredibly amazing group of people that have never made her feel more loved.
That is I love that story. That is so cool. And one of the main things that the PFLAG group, the national group, as well as its 400 chapters, what we do is help people come to terms with a loved one coming out or with their own selves and their questioning, and to learn, educate themselves, and just be able to realize the importance for that other person. And I just love that story about this mom doing it for a 6-year-old. It's so cool.
There's a little bit of information about gender reveal parties in the article as well. Obviously, this was a very celebrative event, but people have gone to great lengths to produce these gender reveal parties, and sometimes they actually get out of hand. The second story is about a Florida city. On the 11th of this month, with a 15-4 vote, the Jacksonville City Council restored an LGBTQ non-discrimination protection policy after the appeals court had struck it down to an administrative or legislative technicality. They created this human rights ordinance in 2017 and applied it to 28 sections prohibiting discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations. A group called the Liberty Council, an anti-LGBTQ hate group that challenges many of these ordinances, filed a civil suit seeking to overturn the ordinance, which eventually they did due to a really slight technicality. The people who were trying to push it through have to submit it in a particular form, and this hate group decided that the form was not, it didn't, supposed to say how it affects the ordinance, and apparently they hadn't done that well enough, and the appeals court, of course, nixed it. But then again, the council fixed all their errors and re-voted on it, and it passed again. So today, Jacksonville City has a human rights ordinance with LGBTQ protections.
We do have a couple of cities with human rights ordinances that protect LGBTQ people in Northwest Indiana.
But not nearly enough.
Not nearly enough, but we will be highlighting those as well in future shows.
One more very quick one. LGBTQ Nation, where I've been getting my news stories from, although I will also seek stories from other media outlets.
There's a wealth of websites and outlets that provide stories.
At any rate, for the month of June, they are publishing a picture and a story, and they had people submit those pictures and stories prior to the beginning of June, and they've been featuring one every day and will continue for the entire month.
That's really cool. Pride in pictures. So it is time for our feature topic. You want to start, Amari?
Sure thing. As part of the journey towards becoming our true and authentic selves, we will continue this topic about identity, in particular, how we use labels to describe different parts of our identities.
So labels help us to identify, describe, distinguish ourselves so that we can find or better understand our place in the world. We can apply labels to others, just as others can apply labels to us. Some labels describe how we feel inside ourselves, and others describe how we may appear to others. So just to give you some examples.
Yes, redhead is a label for a physical characteristic.
Bookstore manager, that's a job title.
Introvert, which is an aspect of your personality.
Doctor, degree, credentials. My brother's a doctor.
Youngest sibling, which is a label indicating relative age and family relationship.
Millennial, a generational designation.
Middle class, which is an economic status label.
A mom, that indicates family relationship.
A nerd, which is a label. Okay, Elisabeth is a self-proclaimed nerd. Which
I'm going to step in here. I feel slightly threatened here. I'm offended.
Of course, generally, that's a label used to indicate intellect.
Tomboy.
I'll go disappear again. Now I feel better.
Tomboy is a form of gender expression and activity. I'm a tomboy.
She's also a creative spirit, which is a label that we use to describe our nature.
Yeah, so those are just some examples to kind of give you a feeling of what we're talking about. And earlier we mentioned that Pride events give many people a chance to be their authentic selves, but what does that mean? It means to be in congruence, to have different parts of us aligned, for our inside to match our outside, our mind and body to match or be in the same direction, our intentions with our actions, emotions with logic, all this type of stuff. It just means to be cohesive and not broken apart and not separated and not having to hide who you are, to be in the closet.
And most importantly, to be validated by others.
Yep. Just like that mom did for her kid. That was so cool.
That was certainly a story of validation.
Yes.
When you are discovering yourself, discovering your identity, there's some questions that you can ask yourself, like, who am I? What is important to me? What do I believe in strongly? What are the values that I stand by? And with whom do I want to spend my time?
There's one more on the back.
There's one more on the back. Oh, what am I passionate about? What activities or hobbies interest me?
So this is kind of the whole age-old question, right? It's like, who am I? But it's very important.
It's what makes us us.
Yeah, right.
We can also use labels to describe other characteristics of ourselves, like sexual orientation and gender identity.
And we kind of teased you with those before by just incorporating them into our stories. So now you're probably wondering, what the heck were they talking about? So you're probably also wondering what this beautiful backdrop is behind us. All right, lean out of the way for a second. All right. Whoa, as I fall over. So this is what we call our gender spectrum board. We designed it for use for last year's Pride Festival, the 2019 NWI Pride. And the purpose was, multiple purposes. One, we wanted to gather some anonymous metrics on the population that the event was serving. We wanted to get people to think about things that maybe they've never thought about. And we wanted to provide some education in a fun and interactive way. Amari, you want to describe the board and how we used it? And then
Sure.
we can get into some of the basic concepts.
The use of the board was that each attendee was given 5 little sticky dots, and they were to place the dots in the 5 different areas that are on the board. The first 3, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation, were depicted as double-ended arrows to represent the spectrum.
Which is just one way of representing it.
Yes, there are many. In fact, this is a 2-dimensional version of a spectrum when in fact the spectrum is in reality 3-dimensional.
At least.
So gender identity and expression lines have the binaries at the end. For example, gender identity on one end has a woman or girl, and on the other side has man or boy. And for gender expression, on the one end is masculine and the other is feminine. Got those backwards.
Yeah.
And in the middle of each of those represent the neither or both options. So whether you identify as a man or a woman or not, the not is in the center. And sexual orientation, the bottom line on the board, one end is represents heterosexual people who identify as heterosexuals, and at the other end, people who identify as either lesbian or gay. And the center is for all other orientations, and there are many labels used to describe those. Each one of these allows you to determine how much you identify as a man or woman, masculine or feminine, or heterosexual, or gay or lesbian. There are two other sections on the board. One is right behind me to allow you to identify as either a cisgender person or a transgender person. And the other side of the graph behind Elisabeth's shoulder is an age. We felt we wanted to determine how many people or what age groups. It isn't really visible on there, but we put them in ages of tens from 0 to 80 or 90. 90.
So this was just one way of representing this information, and we did find that there were some problems with it, like we shouldn't have the nots and boths in the same area. We didn't allow for any correlation between, like, so if Amari put her 5 dots on the board, we wouldn't know which 5 were related. So every dot up here is just an individual unique dot. We're thinking maybe we'll number them next time, 1 through 5. So, or like 1, all 5 would be marked 1. Because we just kind of want to know, again, what is the community here in Northwest Indiana? And that will help us, provide more programming and identify more needs and that type of thing.
And the results of our giant board were generally that people were either existing at the binaries or right in the center. There were only a few folks on gender identity who fell between the center and the endpoints. It was a little bit more distributed evenly for gender expression.
Yeah, we've got a lot of dots in the middle along the whole.
Again, we can talk about how people dress, how perhaps, and many girls like to dress in boys that would be typically associated with men.
Yeah, we're going to get into all those little details.
Maybe I had that backwards, but you get the gist. Of course, one of the things that has plagued the transgender, cross-dressing, drag queen communities has been that wearing pants for a woman is perfectly acceptable, but wearing a dress for a person who is born man at birth, not acceptable. We hope to be changing as we progress in time here.
So there's a really good resource out there by the Trevor Project. It's called Coming Out, a Handbook for LGBTQ Young People. Even though it was designed for youth and teens, I recommend it to all the PFLAG parents because it really helps people navigate questions around identity. And just please know that at any age, it's perfectly acceptable and normal to be questioning your sexual orientation or gender identity and that type of thing, that it changes. And we're going to get into some of the basic concepts here. Of course, that handbook, and there's a wealth of resources out there, but that handbook does a really good job of describing this while being affirming and validating.
So let's define a few things. The first one is called sex assigned at birth. This characteristic is based on generally your physical appearance of your genitalia at birth. It has nothing to do necessarily with your gender. The official assigned sex label is given before you can even speak, walk, or know for yourself what your gender identity really is.
So your true gender may be different from that the doctor assigned you, or it could be the same. And either one is perfectly normal, valid, and wonderful. So, for example, I was assigned female at birth.
And I was assigned male at birth. The second definition is gender identity. This characteristic describes our internal understanding and experience of our own gender. I lived the majority of my life with a gender of man, and I discovered in 2017 that actually isn't how I feel about myself inside.
Well, you knew that before, but you got the language in 2017.
It's important to have language. And one of the things that has developed over time is having more language to describe all of these characteristics, which just helps us define ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may argue, and I actually did argue this in an earlier episode, that gender identity is influenced by external circumstances, our environment, perhaps a parental influence, or actually an internalization of societal norms. However,
I get to talk about the next part. More and more research shows that biology is actually influencing gender expression, sexual orientation, and gender identity. All these characteristics can fall outside of the strict socially defined categories. Talk about that a little bit, Amari.
My gender identity is identify as a woman. And Elisabeth?
I thought it was female. Gender identity. Okay, I identify as a woman also. And people know this. They really know this at about like 3 or 4 years old. Each of our experiences with gender identity is absolutely unique and personal. There's no like rights and wrongs. There's no, we just really aren't on the binary, and we need to be accepting and understanding of that.
And although I identify as a woman, that doesn't mean that I personally feel that I am on the binary necessarily. I'm probably closer to the binary than I am to the middle, other gender identities. But I think each of us actually has both a woman and man component, boy or girl component to our identities. The next definition that we need to cover is gender expression. This characteristic describes the way in which we present ourselves, which can include our physical appearance, our clothing, our hairstyles, and behavior. Gender identity is not the same as gender expression, so that you should not ever assume that the way someone moves, talks, dresses, styles the hair indicates how they identify their gender. There's an infinite amount of amazing ways to be a person of any gender. Some boys wear dresses, some girls have short hair, and some non-binary folks wear makeup.
So, for example, I am a tomboy, and I like a more boho gypsy style. I'm totally, not worried about fashion, much to people's laughter.
And I feel like a woman, no matter what clothing I wear, no matter how I express myself.
So I like to wear like the ankle length skirts, and Amari likes to wear the mini skirts.
Indeed.
It is a little different. All right. So there's also sexual orientation, and that's a huge buzzword. I mean, there's just so much conversation about that. It's a term that actually includes different forms of attraction, behaviors, and identities. And it's been said that gender identity is who you want to be inside, and sexual orientation might have to do with who you want to be with outside. Historically, we've seen all these forms of attraction as the same thing, but as Amari mentioned, language is expanding, and it's helping people to understand the distinctions between all these different categories. So, for instance, there's sexual attraction, physical attraction,
romantic attraction, emotional attraction,
mental or intellectual attraction,
sensual attraction,
and aesthetic attraction.
And we will explore those different kinds of attractions in a future episode.
Yep, it's very, very complex. But so sexual orientation on our chart, as Amari mentioned, goes from like strictly gay and lesbian on one side to strictly heterosexual on the other. And that's basically, do you want to be with somebody of a different gender than you, or somebody of the same gender of you, and then everywhere in between.
questions that you can use to help visualize how you personally experience gender would be, how do I experience my gender? How do I feel in relationship to the sex I was assigned at birth? And what does gender really mean to me?
So I wanted to jump in here real quick and show a couple more drawings. This is called the gender unicorn. Some of you may have seen it. There's also something called the genderbread man that we don't like as much. But this shows you gender identity is how somebody feels inside, and that's the rainbow in the brain. Gender expression is the whole body, how you wear. Sex assigned at birth, again, is genitalia. You're physically or romantically attracted to, that's in the heart area. So this is kind of a cute little illustration. And then the other one we wanted to show is something kind of to explain, transgender versus cisgender. So for instance, because my gender identity matches my sex assigned at birth, female and woman, I am cisgender.
And because my sex assigned at birth and my gender do not match, I am transgender.
So a cisgender person is basically either male or female, man or woman.
Gender identity?
Yeah, man or woman. But under the transgender umbrella, you could either be strictly a trans man or strictly a trans woman. So you're kind of still on the binary, or you can be in the non-binary. And this is where you get all those terms like, non-binary, gender queer, gender fluid, bigender, pangender, all that type of thing.
And to just recap labels really quickly, some of the labels that we learned about today were woman, man, girl, boy, cisgender, and transgender, and then briefly gender nonconforming, which includes a whole family of other labels, and sexuality labels, gay, lesbian, and heterosexual. However, in that category as well, there are a myriad of other labels, which we will be covering in upcoming episodes.
So again, from the Trevor Project Handbook, there's some really important things to keep in mind as you explore and question and wonder about your identity. First of all, you know yourself and what works for you better than anybody else does. Second, each of us has the right to share or not share different aspects of ourselves with others. Third, no one else is entitled to information about your identities. So if you don't want them to know, you don't have to tell them. Fourth, if you choose not to share parts of your identity with others, it does not make you less valid than those who choose to share their identities with other people. And finally, just a reminder that exploring gender identity, sexual orientation, it's normal at all ages and at any stage of life. It can change throughout your life, and all of these experiences are absolutely valid.
And in a lot of cases, very liberating.
Yeah. Amari, it's like a glacier lifted off her shoulders when she realized what was going on. So I guess I wanted to just bring up again this Woman to Woman magazine. They were kind enough to do a cover story on us in honor of Pride Month. But this magazine is, Nicole DeMario is editor-in-chief. And the magazine is always open to story ideas and leads and conversing with talented writers and photographers, makeup artists, hairstylists, LGBTQ support organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to advertise or market, you can reach out to them. But it's a nice little local regional magazine with a variety of helpful articles in it. They make, obviously I'm holding a physical copy, used to go into doctor's offices, dentist offices, libraries, grocery stores. Of course, now with coronavirus, they're mostly at the grocery stores because that's where people go. And then they are also on Facebook. And
can you find the article on Facebook?
Can I find the article on Facebook?
Yes.
Go to Facebook and search for Woman to Woman NWI and look at their photos, and you will see Each of their issues is a photo album, and we are in the June 2020 issue. So thank you again for that.
We'd like to tell you a little bit more about the resources that you can get from support resources that you can get here in Northwest Indiana.
Yeah, so it's been very challenging not to be able to have in-person support meetings because there's just some extra depth. I mean, it's not just the third dimension, but there's some extra depth to meeting with people in person. Of course, since coronavirus hit, we haven't been doing our support meetings in person. We moved to a virtual platform, which works for some people, doesn't work for others. And some people are really burned out by the end of the day from all their Zoom meetings and don't want to, really can't stomach another meeting. But we do both offer a variety of support opportunities online. I know PFLAG National offers opportunities online. Mosaic Health and Healing Arts in Goshen has weekly programs. So there are definitely resources for the PFLAG Crown Point Northwest Indiana chapter. We have teens groups, we have a parents group, we have regular community groups that meet, and we also are connecting people that have small children that identify as LGBTQ so that maybe they can get together and arrange socially distanced or virtual play dates for now. We're hoping to be able to meet in person again, but we're going to be very, very careful when we do, maybe even start outside. So
LGBTQ Northwest Indiana has a once per month transgender support group meeting, adult transgender support group meeting, which is held on the second Monday of the month. It at the current time is also virtual, and also offered is a weekly virtual Wednesday night social hour, which I'm wrapping up one more during the month of June, and I believe I'll discontinue that. There hasn't been a tremendous amount of interest in that. And I think that's due to the many reasons that Elisabeth mentioned. Yeah. The coronavirus pandemic has certainly affected our small nonprofits, as well as many of the nonprofit organizations in Northwest Indiana.
As well as a lot of individuals who are unemployed and having difficulty now. But Amari and I are always available if you have questions, if you need referrals. I mean, just please let us know. We're more than happy to help. Oh. And we're also looking forward to bringing on some guest speakers in our next few shows. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be pretty exciting. Anything else, Amari?
Delving into new ground. I don't think we have anything else for him today, do we?
Okay. Bill, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm finding this all very fascinating. The chart behind you is a statement in of itself. You know, I repeatedly hear about this from healthcare professionals. The drastic spike in mental problems that we all have, mental health problems that we have, is a lot to do with identity. The misalignment of who we think we are versus who we actually are. And the fact that this chart behind you speaks beyond your community. It speaks beyond, it really speaks directly to some of the things that we should look at. Where, who are we? Who do we believe? Who are we genetically meant to be? Who are we environmentally impacted to be? Those are really multi-layered and very complex, and that chart actually starts delving into that. If you go through that chart and begin thinking, where do I lie in that? And just sit and have a moment to try to figure out where all these metrics put you, that's very powerful. To me, that is huge. Mm-hmm. And then it brings upon our community. There should be no prejudice where a person lies in that chart. There should be none at all. That is your personal thing. That's what you hold to yourself. And that's the other problem we have. And it has to do with fear. And I know people often ask Stephen King, why is he such a successful, at writing horror stories? And he says, well, his one premises is the use of fear. There's the monster that comes through the door, and there's the monster that's underneath the bed. The distinguishability is you're always afraid of what you don't know more. And that's where we lie as society. People are afraid not only identifying themselves, but trying to find out about others, and and honoring that. And that's where I this tool can be used to help, maybe not a cure for all society's ills, but we are being challenged as a society with great deal survival. Right now with the COVID-19 is survival, and now we're having to deal with race issues that we've been fighting for centuries. And we need to get these all solved so that we can concentrate on humanity, because I think we're being challenged as a race of humans to survive. And we need to accept each other's differences and understand them so we can gain help from each other and understand. And the way we gain help is being able to understand and respect a person's intelligence to help in a matter, as opposed to being prejudiced about their orientation.
There's so
Probably
much
that's
strength.
too much. I'm sorry, but that's what I was thinking as I was looking at this chart. This could be a chart, to understand ourselves and that's powerful to me.
Well, I had never thought about this kind of stuff. I just grew up kind of lollybopping through life, knowing who I was, or thinking, not even questioning that I might not know who I was as far as these characteristics. And then when Amari made her discovery, of course, that's causing me to question, and say, well, what is this? What is, and it's been very interesting. And when we had this at the Pride Festival, we got an overwhelming number of comments from people that said, that is really cool. I never thought about this. I didn't know how to think about it. And I had no idea where to put my sticker.
And
however,
the other thing to online,
in retrospect,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
In retrospect, however, although we learned a lot from this particular board, we realized that there are so many modifications that we could make to it to make it that much better.
Yep. So
well, it is an amazing statement on where people lie mentally, and it's an amazing metric, if you will. And now one complexity on top of this all is the word love. Where does love fit in that? And is love to be judged by this? If where your partner falls in this complex metric, if that love still survives, what is that as a statement? So that's something to think about.
And although this board is chock full of labels and there's dots everywhere on this board, none of this should matter. We should all love, accept,
exactly,
validate everyone.
There is so much strength in diversity.
Exactly. And this should just be a metric to help people figure out who they are. And that's no one's other issue, no matter where you lay, except your own. That is not to be judged by anyone, because that in itself is damaging. And there's so many things that we have to tackle as humans. But this is, again, I'm so happy we're able to provide this platform for you to educate people and to help. And this is huge. In fact, if you could do me a favor, if you have that electronically, I would love to put that up on our Facebook page, or maybe the next show, as you begin talking about it, just overlay that, and so that it could be clear, because you guys are blocking some of it. But I understand it, but I think it would help, and I'd be willing to help out with that. So if you get that to me, that is a powerful tool that you have there. So
we should have the original without all the dots on it electronically that we can get to.
As well as a picture
that'd be great.
The dots.
That'd be great. Boy, this has been educational. I've sit back. The flags, I had no idea the amount of flags, but then that speaks to where everyone lies in their journey. And it's powerful that people have come up with a flag to represent where they are. Here we are. This is who we are. And the thing that would be powerful for me is till we get to the point where they don't need a flag. And that flag
Absolutely.
is, we are humans. And what does that look like? Is it binary? Who cares? We are humans, and that is where I think we all need to get at and celebrate. That's the point where we need to start celebrating, when we gain that understanding and we waste all this time. We get away from all this misspent time on hate and misunderstanding each other and just develop acceptance. So, okay. Well, this has been great. I tell you what. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sure I'm clapping hands on behalf of Kelly, who's out being our roving reporter today. So, boy, if you guys want to wrap up the show, just let me know.
Okay.
Sure.
Yep.
Just as some final notes, if you're feeling suicidal or overwhelmed, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 800-273-8255, or the Trevor Project, Trevor Lifeline at 866-488-7386. And for those who want to or are trying to quit smoking, the smoking cessation line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW.
The Trevor Project also has ways that you can either chat or text, so that if you can't talk on the phone at where you are, you can still text or do an electronic chat with people to get support. And please know that a mental health provider is always just a phone call away.
And with that, thank you for tuning in to LGBTQ Northwest Indiana and PFLAG Crown Point TV. Thank you again to the Bill and Collie Show. We will see you all next time.
Yep. So stay tuned for future shows.
Goodbye
for
now.
Twice a month.
Goodbye for now. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Goodbye. Happy Pride Month.
This
Happy
episode
Pride.
of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by Sip Coffee House 2 in Highland, Indiana on Jewett Avenue. Great coffee, lattes, smoothies, and more. Food and treats you will adore. Small town charm with big city selection. It's Sip Coffee House 2. If it's breakfast, brunch, or lunch you need, Les Cafe is the place to go, indeed. Open 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. 7 days a week. Les Cafe Pancake House, located in Highland, Indiana on Highway Avenue. Les Cafe, where less is more. Promise You Art House, a fun and vibrant place for local artisans to display and sell their creative works, owned and operated by artists for artists. Conveniently located at 8830 Kennedy Avenue in Highland, Indiana. For hours and events, visit pyarthouse.com or follow them on Facebook. Promise You Art House, where creativity reigns.